Today, I'm going to teach you how to build a complete task manager from scratch in Notion. We are going to start from a completely blank page, and by the end of this video, you're going to have a full-blown task manager with an inbox for quickly brain-dumping tasks, a complete project manager, some useful scheduling views, a calendar or two, and even some advanced features like subtasks and recurring tasks that you can even automate if you want to. At the end of this build, you'll have a simple, elegant task manager with all of your views accessible from a single page. And you'll also be able to open up projects as their own pages where you can add new tasks and make sure everything's getting done. And this build starts right now over in screen share mode. Here we have our new page, completely blank page in Notion. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually favorite this page to get it in my sidebar, which if I hit Command / on my keyboard, I can see it right there. That's going to give us easy access to this page and the sub pages we're going to create in it throughout the video. I'm going to go ahead and close this one more time, and we're going to call this page Ultimate Tasks. This is going to be the home page of our task manager. And we're also going to give it a nice little icon. Now, when I create pages in Notion, I like to have a little bit of a convention I follow where I use blue icons. And then later on, I'll show you databases, which I use red icons for. So we're going to give this a nice little checkbox. And there we have our Ultimate Tasks page. By the way, Ultimate Tasks is also the name of a completely free Notion template that I provide on my website. So if you just need a task manager in your Notion workspace and you don't want to go through this entire guide and build it yourself, you can check out the link in the description down below, and you can have that template in your workspace in seconds. It's 100% free. But if you do want to build this for yourself and learn all these tricks I'm going to show you in this video, first, let's go ahead and set this page as a full width page, just like that. And then let's do a little bit of customization, because by default, there are page discussions and a table of contents widget that I don't really want, since this homepage is kind of going to function as an app, not like a page of notes. So let's turn those off. I'm also going to turn off the backlinks function, and I'm going to set my inline comments to minimal. This basically makes this as blank of a canvas as we can get. And to start painting on this canvas and to make it a useful tool, I'm going to create our first internal page. So I'll type /page just like that, and I'm going to name this internal page Databases. So this page is going to hold all of the internal databases that run our template. And to give it a fitting icon here, I'm going to go to Add Icon, go to the little Icons tab to use Notion's actual custom icons, and I'm going to find an icon called Stacked Disks. I think this represents databases quite well, so this is a nice little icon for our purposes. And just like before, I'm going to go ahead and turn off all of that extra stuff in Customize Page. I don't need discussions, I don't need table of contents. I'll set this to minimal, and I'll turn off our backlinks. So this page is essentially going to hold all the databases that will run our task manager. We need a place to store tasks, and we also need a place to store our projects. And if you've ever used a traditional task manager before, like Todoist or Apple Reminders, then the setup is actually the same behind the scenes. It's just that in those apps, you usually don't see the actual databases. But every task manager needs a place to store the tasks, and it needs a place to store projects as well. Then when you go to, say, a due today list or a specific projects list, you're seeing a slice of those databases defined by filters and sorts and other criteria. Well, in Notion, we get to build that for ourselves, which does take a little bit longer because we set things up personally, but it also means we get full control and we can customize things to our heart's content. So to get that process on the road, let's go ahead and create our first database. I'm going to type /database. And at the end of this tutorial, I am going to turn these databases into full pages, but for setting up complex builds like this that use multiple databases, going with inline databases to start actually makes sense. So I'm going to go ahead and call this database Tasks. And I have many Tasks databases in my Notion account. So I'm going to say Tasks Current is the current name of this database. So I'm going to create a Tasks database. I'm also going to create a Projects database. So once more, database in inline configuration. We're going to go with a new table just like that and call this one Projects Current. And then I want to add something a little special to this task manager as well. I'm going to create a third database, also as an inline database, and I'm going to call this database Task Journal. So the Task Journal is a database that's going to allow you to create a daily journal entry where you can very easily plan your day. In my second brain template, Ultimate Brain, which is what I use to run my own personal productivity system, we have a bit of a more advanced dashboard called My Day. And one of my favorite features in there is this ability to check this little My Day checkbox on any task in the inbox or in the scheduled views to add it to a specific execution view where you're basically deliberately saying, these are the tasks I'm going to work on today, regardless of the due dates they may have already on them. And that's a bit more of a complex setup. I want to teach that in a future video, but here we're going to get something kind of similar where each day you can create a little journal page and you can very deliberately decide what you're going to work on. For some people, that works wonders, and it's really easy to include in a task manager like this. So we're going to do it with this task journal. So at this point, we have all the databases we're going to use for this build. And now I want to give each of them an icon. To do that, we can't set it here in this inline view. So if we click this little 3-dot menu next to the tasks database's title, we can go to view database, and here we see a full page view of that database. Up here, we have add icon along with cover and description. I'm just going to go with icon. And a convention that I like to use when I'm building Notion systems is that pages have blue icons, databases have red icons. So I'm going to go with red right here, and then we're going to go with a little check mark for the tasks database, just like that. I'm going to do the same thing for our projects and our task journal databases. So now we have our icons. The next step in the process, which is one of the most important, is to start creating what are called database properties on our databases. And we're going to start with our tasks database. I think I'm also going to open this up as a full page, which I can do just like this in addition to viewing the database right there. And essentially, the properties we're going to add to this database are going to be attributes which apply to every page in the database, things like the due date, the status, that kind of thing. And because we're building a task manager, we can actually do this very quickly for a few of the crucial properties by turning this into what's called a tasks database. And we can do that by going to the little 3-dot menu here, which is the view options menu inside of this database, going to customize, and then we can go to tasks right here. And basically turning a database into a tasks database is going to ask us to pick properties that represent the assignee, the status, and the due date of any task. And once you've done this, you will ensure that this database fits a specific schema or structure, and that will allow you to actually see the tasks from this database in the little My Tasks widget in Notion's home feature. I've got a whole video about that in case you're curious. We're not going to cover it here, but I do want to show you how to build a tasks database. So here you can see we have no existing properties in the database already. So we're going to be creating new properties for each of these 3 pieces of data: assignee, status, and due date. We'll just turn this into a task database just like that. And already you can see we have 3 new properties: assignee, due, and status. Now from this point, it's going to be way easier to follow things if we have some sample tasks in this database. So I'm going to go ahead and add those in super speed mode. So the next part of the process is to tweak some of these properties and add a few more that are going to be useful for our task management purposes. Now, we're not going to add every single property that's going to end up in this task manager at the end of this video right now. We do have a few advanced properties like our recurring tasks properties and our subtasks properties that we're going to add later, but we are going to add most of them right now. We're also going to make a few tweaks. So the first thing that I want to do is change up the options in this status property. And what I'll point out is the status property has a name of status, but it also has a type of status. And status properties are really made for task management. They've got these 3 different groups that you actually can't change: to do, in progress, and complete. And then you can have multiple options inside of each of these groups. But the other really useful thing about the status type property is that you can have a default option. There's another type of property in Notion called select, which looks pretty similar to this, but with select properties, you can't have a default. And with certain types of properties, like a status property here, we want to make sure every page we create has a default value instead of having an empty value. So a status property really makes sense here. Now, personally, not started is not really doing it for me here. Number one, I have a little bit of synesthesia, and I think a task that is not started should be red, not gray. And I'm also going to go with to do instead of not started. That just seems a little bit better to me. Now, an in progress task in my head is actually blue, so we're going to keep that, but we are going to name it doing instead of in progress. And then done is perfectly good for me. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. We're also going to create another status property. So let's go ahead and find status right here. And we're going to call this one priority. And with Notion properties and databases, you can actually give them custom icons now. So instead of this little Walmart logo, essentially, we are going to find ourselves an exclamation point. I think is going to be pretty good. Exclamation point, rather. And now this is a little bit of a non-standard use of a status property because priorities don't really change too much for tasks. You're either going to have a high priority task or a low priority task. So a trick that I like to use when leveraging the default value of a status property in a property like this is to just move all the options into one of the groups. And usually I just use in progress. So let's go ahead and rename not started to low. I think blue for low totally makes sense. However, the middle option, medium, should actually be our default. So we're going to go ahead and set this as the default right here. And all new pages are going to have medium as their value. I forgot that when you set a default, you actually lose the name you typed in here. So you got to do it one more time. And then here is going to be our high priority task. So high is going to be red for red alert. And actually medium, I think, will work as green instead of blue. So that's our priority property. The next property I want to create will be an actual select type property. So I'm going to hit this little plus icon at the right side of our table view here. We're going to find the select property type right there. And we're going to call this property Smart List. Now in my ultimate brain template, which is built for complete life management, there's another property called Smart List there, which is used for GTD workflows, or David Allen's Getting Things Done workflows. So there's quite a few options in the Smart List property in that template. Here, we're going to keep things very, very simple. I want to use Smart List as a place for tasks that I'm going to call someday tasks. Basically a task that I want to brain dump out of my head. I don't want to kick it up here. I want it in a system I can trust, but it's something I know I'm just not going to do right now. We're going to use the Smart List property here to ensure that we have a safe place to tuck those types of tasks without having to create some sort of arbitrary project for them, or without having to leave them in our inbox, which we want to have clear most of the time. So here we're just going to add an option called someday. And due to my touch of synesthesia, I think someday is a pink word. So I'm going to go with pink. You can go with anything you want. And of course, if you have other types of Smart List values you'd like to add here, you can totally do that, but we're going to stick with someday for now. Now, next on our list, we're going to create a text type property. So I'm going to find text right here. We're going to call this property description. And of course, you could always put the description of a task in the page body, but you might want to put it in a nice little description property instead. So we're going to create that so you have the option. Next, we're going to create created and edited time properties. So if we type created here, we'll see created by, but also created time. Created time is useful just for seeing when a task was actually created. And I personally like having it just be called created instead of created time. And with our created property, we're also going to pair that with an edited time property. So if we look for edited, we'll see last edited time. I think that's a bit wordy, so we're going to go with edited instead. And finally, we're going to create what is one of the most important properties in this database. We need to create a relation property that will link this database to our projects database. So to do that, we're going to click plus just like always. We're going to find the relation type, and then we're going to click it and find our projects database. Now I want to give you a quick little tour of what relation properties are and what they do here. Essentially, a relation property allows you to basically link pages in one database to other pages, either in the same database or in another database. And if you think about the way apps are designed, this is crucial. If we're building a task manager, we're going to have a table of our tasks, and we're also going to have a table of our projects. And we need a way to link specific project records to their tasks and vice versa. There's all kinds of other relationships in databases that need these links as well. Think about a book tracker. You're going to have a list of books and a list of authors, or a list of books and a list of genres, maybe genres and movies. There's all kinds of links in data all throughout the world, and relation properties are what allow us to forge those links, at least in Notion. So you'll see here, the first database in a relation properties configuration is always going to be this database. That would allow you to link other pages in the database. And you're actually going to see an example of that later with parent tasks and subtasks. But for our purposes, we want to link task records here to projects in the projects database that we're building. So we're going to choose this projects database right there. And now here, this is no longer the name of the database. We're actually giving the property a name. So I'm going to go ahead and give this property the name project. And then the next item I'd like to bring your attention to is this limit option right here. By default, it is set to no limit, but we can also change it over to one page. And essentially what it's asking us to do here is define the type of relationship that we're forging between our tasks database and our projects database. And I want to take a quick second to explain this because this is actually quite important for building applications, either in Notion or in really any other platform, including a coding language and an actual database like MySQL. So when we're working with data, there are three specific types of relationships we can have. And I just remembered that I drew a little graphic with these relationships. So I'm going to put it right here and zoom in a little bit. We have one-to-one relationships, we have one-to-many relationships, and we have many-to-many relationships. So you can see here an example of a one-to-one relationship would be a person to a set of fingerprints. A person can only have one set of fingerprints and vice versa. A many-to-many relationship would be like students and classes. Every student could be in multiple classes where every class has multiple students. But then we have one-to-many relationships, project to tasks being a great example. One project may have many tasks, but every task should only have one project. And that is what we are basically deciding on here. Do we want to create a one-to-many relationship or a many-to-many relationship? And since we're creating a task manager, we want to go with a one-to-many relationship. So we're going to go with one page here, and that'll mean each task in this database can only have one project to which it's related. Now, we also do want to turn on this two-way relation option. And what that's going to do is essentially create a related or reciprocal property in the projects database where we'll be able to set task relations. So we're going to call that property tasks. And we're going to use plurality here because, again, a project can have many tasks related to it. So we'll add that relation right there. And for now, that's going to be all of the properties we create in our tasks database. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at each individual task page and how it looks. So if we open up this lift weights task, we can see that this is what we get, just a big old vertical list of all these properties. And I don't know about you, but I think we can do better, especially since Notion just came out with a layouts feature that allows us to customize what the pages in databases actually look like. So if we go right up here above the page title, we're going to have a couple of options, add icon or add cover. We also have this customize layout option right here. And if we click into it, we get this nice little interface where we can customize how every page in this database is going to look. And I do want to stress that we're not just customizing the lift weights page, we're actually customizing the overall layout of every page in this tasks database. And I think I'm going to zoom out just a couple of ticks here to give us a little bit more breathing room here. And we want to make some customizations. So first and foremost, I want to pin a few useful properties directly beneath the title of the page. So if we click the heading box right here, we get all these unpinned properties and we can choose which ones we want to pin. Now, of course, I want to remind you that you're building software for yourself here. So you can follow what I'm doing to the letter, but you can also make changes and make tweaks to your heart's content. And I encourage you to do that. Personally, I want to go ahead and pin my status. I also want to pin my due date property. And I think I also want to pin my project property. The rest of these can stay in the property group, but these ones I'm going to be looking at and editing pretty often. So I do want them pinned. And I really like how they go in this horizontal line here instead of being this vertically stacked group. Now, what I also want to do is not see all of these properties immediately, because in many cases, I want to open a task page and immediately jot down some notes in the page body. So I can actually accomplish that by clicking the property group right here, go into the little three-dot menu and hitting move to panel. That will move this over to this little side panel, which is hidden by default. And then in the side panel, this property group here, I can also customize how this itself looks. And if we go over here, we can see that I can turn on or off the visibility of any property. I can also reorder properties, and I can create specific sections for these properties as well. So I'm going to create a section, and I'm going to call this section General Properties. And then I'm going to create one additional section, which I will call Helper Properties. So helper properties are usually just going to be properties that help to run the template, but that we usually don't want to see. Things like formulas and rollups and things like that. And we are going to create at least one of those in this video, which we'll create right now. And that's going to be a formula type property, which I'm going to call meta labels. So meta labels is a handy little property where we can show little icons or emoji on our tasks depending on their state. For example, we're going to add some formula code a little bit later on, which will show us if a task is recurring as well as if it's overdue. And of course, with the formula knowledge you're going to gain from that part of the video, you could add other labels if you wanted to and build all kinds of other cool formulas. For now, though, we're going to leave that blank. We just want to make sure the formula property exists, and that's going to help us when we're setting up our views of our task database a little bit later. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this meta labels property is always hidden. I think I can also zoom in a couple of ticks again so you can see this a bit more easily. And then up here, let's go ahead and do a little bit of ordering here. I think I want smart list up there. I want priority at the top, and then description actually might be useful above priority, just so you can add the description right there really, really quickly. And then I think I want to go ahead and hide my edited property, my created property, and I'm also going to hide the assignee property, since what we're building in this particular video is a single player task management system, or at least that's the intention. Now, I do have plans to do more team-focused tutorials in the future this year on this channel. And if you are running a team or you're running a company, my team can actually help you build a more robust and customized Notion setup. You can email me at the link in the description down below if that is you. But for now, we're trying to keep this simple, and I'm trying to make this a great course for individual users. So we're going to hide that assignee property. We do need it to exist, though, for this tasks database to be a task database in the Notion home sense. Okay, So let's go ahead and apply this to all pages and move on to the next part of our build. Our next task of sorts is to customize some of the views in the source database over here. But I first want to point out here is our handiwork. We have our nice little pinned properties in this lift weights page. And if I want to see all the other properties, I can either click this view details icon right here, or click the one up here, which will open the little side panel and I can see all of those properties with their visibility statuses that we set. So we'll go ahead and close that. And our next task is to make this look a little bit prettier. So first, I'm going to go ahead and actually rename this initial view of our tasks database. I'm going to name this to active tasks, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a, how about this little open dot circle icon? This will be all of our undone tasks. So to make sure this fits the name, let's go ahead and give it a filter as well. And you'll find the filter icon right there, which will allow you to create either simple filters or advanced filters. Now, if you are somebody who's focused on minimalism, you may like simple filters. For example, if you just click status right here, you're going to get this nice, simple little filter. But personally, I prefer advanced filters. So I'm going to go ahead and click that bottom option, hit advanced filter right there. And that gives us this little UI here where we can build more complex sets of filters. And for this view in particular, we don't have to get too fancy, but later on we are going to need advanced filters. And if we're going to need them at all, I prefer to have a pretty consistent UI for my filters throughout my entire build. So here, because we want active tasks, all we're going to do is create a filter where our status is not, and then we're going to set is not to the complete category here. So if we have a done task, it's not going to show up here. We may also want to sort this view. So if we go to the little sort icon, we can do that. And I think I want to sort this by the due date in ascending order. Of course, we have no due dates right now, but if we did, they would be at the top. And we can actually show that by maybe setting a due date. Let's say lift weights is due today and something else is due tomorrow, just like that. They are sorted. Now, I also want to make this table view a little bit prettier. It's kind of spread out, and we're not going to be coming to this database very often because it's the source database. We're going to use more customized views of it for most of our daily work, but I do like everything to look a little bit prettier than its default state. So let's go ahead and change these widths a little bit. We'll make smart list skinnier because this setup guitar recording rig task only has someday in it, and there's a lot of room over on the right side. And if we want to, we can even hide some of these properties. By hiding them, they won't be deleted, but they will not show on this table. So let's say created is not that useful to us. We can hide it right there. Edited, also not that useful. And of course, we can also reorder our properties. So I think project is actually pretty important. We're going to bring that over here. Assignee, again, we're not going to be using too much in this build, so we're going to go ahead and hide that. Do is important, so we're actually going to move that before project. Meta labels, not that important in this view. Status, very important. And in fact, I want to show you a really cool trick with status properties. So of course, we could make this really skinny and we could move it over. But for most tasks you're going to be working on, you are going to use only two of the status options, to do and done. You're probably not going to be using doing very often. So something we can do on a per view basis is click the status property, go to edit property, and then we can show it as a checkbox instead of a select property. And then once we've done that, we can also scrunch this in so it only shows the icon. And we have this nice little row of checkboxes, which we can then move to the left of our task titles. And that is a task manager if I've ever seen one. Now, here's a cool trick. If you want to get into those options, you can actually hold Option or Alt on your keyboard, Alt if you're on Windows, and that's going to bring up all of the options you have. And if you go with an in-between option, you'll see a nice little minus box right there. So nice little trick there. At this point, we are done setting up all of our widths and customizations in here. So the next thing I want to do is duplicate this view, this active view, and we're going to create a corresponding done view. So we'll call this done, or maybe complete, actually. We're going to find a nice little check mark icon for our complete tasks. And because we've duplicated the view, we don't have to make all those tweaks all over again. All we have to do is just tweak the filters and the sorts to actually fit the purpose. So here we're going to change our status is not done filter to status is done, just like that. Save that for everyone. And then we should maybe also change our sort criteria from do in ascending order to do in descending order. That way, you're most likely going to see your most recently completed tasks at the top. Pro tip, I'm not going to show this in this video, but you could, if you wanted to, also create a second date property for the completion date. And then you could use Notion's automations feature to automatically set completion dates when you check tasks off. We are going to show off an automation in this video later on in the recurring tasks section, but I'm not going to get too much into automations in this tutorial because they are a paid feature. So we're going to try to avoid them as much as possible to make this tutorial very accessible. Now, before we move on from this source database here, I do want to create one additional view, and that's going to be a calendar view. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So right here, we can click this plus icon, we can go to more, and we can click calendar. And just like that, we get this nice little calendar view where you can see any of the tasks that are due on your calendar. Now, we want to create a calendar view for this database because you're going to see this little open in calendar button once you create it. If you give a calendar view to a database in Notion, you'll also be able to open that database view up in the Notion calendar app. And that'll allow you to bring in database views like your tasks database into Notion Calendar along with your Google Calendar accounts. And if you want to mix those together like I do, that's how you can do it. I've got 2 videos on Notion Calendar, so I'm not going to go too much into it here, but it is really, really useful. And this is exactly how you get that integration working. So we now have our initial source database. The next thing we're going to do is really the most useful part of this build. We're going to start creating the views that you're going to use every single day. And I'm going to go ahead and actually bring up another view here. Let's do first 3/4 to expand that. This is essentially what we're going to be building in this section. These really useful views that show us our tasks database in specific contexts. We've got an inbox here. We have a today view. We've got a calendar view that has just the current week in it, a scheduled view for all scheduled tasks, etc. This is really the meat and potatoes of this tutorial. Everything we've done so far before this has really just been kind of prep for this. So to start this process, we're going to use the breadcrumbs to traverse our way up the tree back to our Ultimate Tasks homepage. And this is where we're going to start building these views. That way, you've got a single page in Notion where you can just go and see your inbox, see your due today tasks, see really everything. So to get that process started, we are going to do a /list command. And this is going to allow us to create a specific layout type for either a new database or an existing database. And that is what we're going to choose, that latter option. So if we go with list view right here, you can see we can do a blank database, or we can go with any database in our workspace that already exists. So if we go with tasks current, you can see that we've basically just created another view of the database like we did with the active and complete and calendar views. But this view exists somewhere else. It doesn't have to be a tab on that source database that we created earlier, which means we can put it anywhere we want. So we're going to go with a new list view right here. We're going to call this inbox. And because we're creating an inbox, we're going to give this a nice little tray icon. So an inbox is essentially a default place to dump tasks that come into your life. And it's crucial to have one of these in some shape or form. If you're this far into this video, it looks like you want to have it in Notion, but it's really crucial to have an inbox of some kind, because if you don't have a default place to dump tasks, if there's a lot of friction involved in getting tasks into your system, you're not going to use your system and you're going to try to remember things, which often doesn't work. So the inbox is going to be a place where we can just dump stuff and then process it later on. So we're going to go with the name inbox. We are going to hide our database title. And then we're also going to go ahead and not show our page icons over here, because just like we did before, we want to show our checkboxes over here instead. So we'll go ahead and hide that page icon, hit done. And now we are ready to start configuring things. We've got quite a few options here. We can do our filters, we can do our sorts, we can do grouping, all kinds of crazy stuff. But for the most part, all we really need to do in the view options menu right now is choose the properties that we want to see. Right now, we only see the name of the page, and that's not all that useful because we'd have to click into the specific page to see all the properties. We can actually show the most useful properties here instead. And to do that, we can go back to that view options menu, go to properties right here, and choose the ones we want to see. So I think I want to see the status property. I think I also want to see project. I want to see the due date. And I also want to see that meta labels property. Now, right now, this is not able to show anything because it's just a blank formula, but we are going to be duplicating this view quite a few times, and we want to cut down on the amount of work we do. So we are going to pre-place this meta labels property in each of our views, and then later on, we're going to go ahead and type in the formula. And I'm ordering things that way because formulas are a little bit complex and I want to put them later on in the video like a good educator would. But again, we do want to save on some effort here. We can also reorder our properties, and I'm going to go ahead and put status first, just like that. I think project and due are in the right places, but meta labels maybe should go before both of them. We also are going to use that nice little checkbox trick. So we're going to go into our status property, show this as a checkbox just like that. And now we have all the properties that we want. Of course, none of these tasks here actually have a project or a meta labels property right now. Most of them don't have due date properties, but by showing those properties in the view options menu, we can now click the little edit icon and we can add projects. We can add due dates. If you have any other properties you want to show there, you can edit those properties from this view as well. Now, to make this a useful inbox, we also want to add some filters so we don't just see everything, because an inbox really is designed to be cleared, and you clear an inbox in one of three ways. You do the task, check it off, you delete the task, realize it wasn't actually that important to me in the first place, or most importantly, you put tasks that you should do later in the correct project where they belong. We're building a tasks and projects system here, not just a simple to-do list. So to get our inbox into the shape it needs to be in, to whip it up into fighting shape, we are going to create some filters. Once again, I prefer advanced filters. Of course, you can do pretty much everything here with simple filters if you want, but I really just love the way this looks. And for the purposes of building an inbox, the first filter we want to create is a status is not complete filter. That way, when we check off a task, it leaves the inbox. We also want tasks to leave the inbox when they gain a project. So we're going to add a secondary rule, and we're going to say this rule is where the project is empty. So the moment we apply a project, the task is going to leave the inbox. And notice we get this little and option right here. So it's basically saying any page in this view must fit both of these rules right here. And finally, because we created the little someday option in our smart list value or smart list property a little bit earlier, we are also going to add a third filter rule. And we're going to say where the smart list is either empty, or if you wanted to get a little fancy, you could say is not the someday list. Now, because we only have someday here, I'm going to go ahead and just say smart list should be empty. That way, if we add that someday option, we are going to get tasks out of the inbox that way as well. So now we have our inbox rules. We may also want to sort this view. So let's go ahead and sort by due date in ascending order. And that is pretty much our inbox view done. Now, I do want to note you have other options that you could pursue. For example, if you were building this for a team, you could actually come up to the view right here. And if you go to rename, you could add a bit of an explanation of what this view is supposed to be for. You can also do that for properties. You can do that for property options. If you get any of my Notion templates, especially Ultimate Brain, you're going to find descriptions on literally everything. And if you're building stuff for a team, those can be really helpful to add. But at this point, we're pretty much locked in with how we want our inbox to be designed. And the beauty of already setting our property visibilities and basically setting up all of this stuff as it is means when we want to create another view, like a due today view, we can just duplicate this view instead of reconfiguring a view from scratch every single time. So instead of clicking plus and doing all that all over again, let's just right-click inbox, hit duplicate, and name this view today. We're going to change this from a tray icon to maybe a sun icon like that. And then all we need to do to get this view to actually show us our tasks that are due today is change the filters. I think the sort is actually perfect as it is already. Due in ascending order makes perfect sense, but right now it's designed to be an inbox. So let's go ahead and get rid of this smart list is empty rule right there. And then we can actually change this project is empty rule to where due is not empty, but due is on or before, and we'll find the today dynamic value right there. Now, one thing you may want to do is change the start date value to end date. And that is because, I'll actually show you here, in Notion, we can define date ranges for pages as well as singular dates. So right now we have January 27th, that's just a singular date. But if we go with end date here, let's say for some reason we're going to do like a 3-day weightlifting session, we could set the end date for this task as January 29th. And now you can see, because we set the end date to January 29th, which is not today, and our rule is targeting the end date, we do not see that task as due today. Now, if you have a task, and you already saw this, but if you have a task that doesn't have a range, just has a single date, that single date counts as both the start date and the end date. So the distinction here in the filters really only applies to pages where you have specifically set up a date range. And I wanted to point that out because a lot of people ask me about it in our customer community for our premium templates. Okay, we are done with our today view. That's perfectly good. So now let's go ahead and duplicate it one more time and create ourselves a week view. So this is going to be a nice little calendar view. I'm going to change this over to a calendar icon. And because it's a calendar view, our layout type is currently not correct. We don't want a list view. We want a calendar view, just like that. And now with calendar views, we get a lot of additional options here. We can wrap our page titles, which I do want to do. We can ensure that we're showing our calendar by the due property, which you can change it to other date or created or edited time properties if you want to. You can also show the calendar as a month or a week. And I think I actually want to go with week here. And then of course you can also hide weekends if you just don't ever want to work weekends, which would be awesome if you could do. Now I love the side peek in Notion. I love it way more than center peek. So I pretty much always set that open pages in option to side peek. And I think showing the page icon actually might be kind of nice for the calendar views here. So within our calendar view, because we changed the layout type, our displayed properties are going to be reset. And because this is just a calendar view, I think it doesn't make sense to show the due date. It's already kind of obvious when it's due, but we do want to show, say, the status and maybe the project as well. I think that's going to be perfect for our purposes here. Now we're also going to create a view that shows us all of our scheduled tasks, no matter what week they fall in. So let's go ahead and create another duplicated view of our today view here to get that list layout one more time. We're going to call this scheduled. And I think I'm going to go with the little calendar icon one more time. And then the filter on this view is going to change from where due's end date is on or before today to where due is simply not empty. So this is going to be a view still sorted by our due property in ascending order that shows us all of our scheduled tasks. And I think this is also a great opportunity to teach you about the grouping option because it can be quite useful here. So I'm going to scoot over to our inbox real quick and I'm going to say change the HVAC filter is a task that's actually due a couple of months from now. Let's just say March 10th is the next time I need to do it. So in scheduled, we've got this big list of tasks and you can imagine this could be pretty big, but some of these dates are quite different than the others. So if we go to our view options menu, we can actually group by our due date property. We can actually group by pretty much any property, but in this case, we're going to go with due date. And you can see here, this creates nice little toggleable groups for tasks that are due in specific date ranges. And we can date by this relative property by default. We can also date by specific days, by weeks, by months, all kinds of stuff. I'm going to go with relative right here. And of course, we can also sort if we want to as well. So I'm going to go ahead and keep this just like this. This will create these nice little groups to show you what's due today, what's due tomorrow, what's due in a different month. And I'm going to call that our scheduled view done. Okay, the next view we're going to create is actually the exact opposite because this view right here is not showing us any tasks that do not contain a due date. Now the inbox would, but if we created tasks and put them in projects, we wouldn't see them here. So let's make sure we have a view that will show us those undue tasks. We'll duplicate this one more time, call this view no due. Let's find maybe a nice little dot circle for that view, just like that. Because these tasks are not going to have a due date, we do not want our due grouping. So I think I'm actually going to set this to smart list instead. And I think I will not hide the empty groups. I'll put someday down here. And then if we change our filter value from where due is not empty to where due is empty, now we can see all of our tasks that do not have a due date yet. And it doesn't really make sense to sort those by due date here since none of them can have one. So let's go ahead and get rid of that view or that sort rule. And you could either have no sort here and drag things around, or it might be useful if you went with edited and went with descending order. That way, the task that you most recently edited will show up at the top here. And I've added smart list grouping to this view because if you have stuff in your someday list, this gives you a really easy way to see that someday list, also minimize it if you don't want to see it without us having to create a very specific someday view, which is just going to crowd up all the views here in the horizontal tabs. Speaking of our horizontal tabs, we're going to create a few more useful views. One of those is going to be a by project view. So let's go ahead and duplicate our no due view right here. Call this one by project. We're going to give this a nice little rocket ship icon because, of course, projects are rocket ships that take you to the moon. And we're going to set our grouping from smart list to, you guessed it, project. And what this creates is a really, really useful view where you can see all of your projects as groups, and then you can see all the tasks inside of those projects. And to teach this a little bit better, let's go ahead and actually create a couple of sample projects. So we'll go beneath our tasks database. We're going to create a project for setting up video studio, and we'll do another one for building out garage gym. And maybe we'll also do like a maintenance project as well. So I'm going to do home ongoing, which will just be for like home maintenance tasks. So now if we go back to our little home page here, maybe we want to add a few of these tasks to their requisite projects. Guitar recording rig seems like one that would go in our video studio project. Same with setting up the stream deck just like that. And as you watch me do this, you're going to start seeing some project groups popping up here. And just like that, we can see these nice little groups for our projects. Now we're also going to be able to go into project pages later on and see all the tasks within those project pages, but this gives you a really, really easy way to see everything. So let's go ahead and customize this view. Maybe we don't want to see any tasks that don't have a project here. So if we wanted to, we could add a filter for that. Let's just say where project is not empty, just like that. And I do want to note that I'm keeping this build purposefully simple since a lot of beginners may be watching this, and I'm trying to keep it from being like 3 hours. But in the Ultimate Tasks template, again, link to the description down below, I do have a fancy filter in here with a special formula that figures out if a project's status is active and only shows tasks from active projects, because you may have projects you've created that are just planned or on hold or maybe even done, and maybe you don't want to see those groups in this kind of view. So there is a way to do that, and you can feel free to study my free Ultimate Tasks template if you want to learn how to do it. There's a bit of a complex formula behind it, which is why we're not doing it here. So we have our little rule set right there. Let's go back into our grouping and make sure that we're also hiding empty groups. We are. You could also sort this by manual if you had a particularly important project you wanted to put at the top, just like that. And because we can already see the name of each project right here in the group, we may also want to go into the properties here and just hide that project because it's just a little bit redundant looking if we have it there. And to finish this view off, let's go ahead and set the edited in descending order sort rule back to do in ascending order, because again, you're probably going to have a lot of tasks in here with due dates, and you want to see the most upcoming tasks, the ones you need to do soonest, at the top per project. Okay, let's go ahead and duplicate this view. We're going to create another view called all, and like it sounds, this view is going to show us all of our tasks. So let's go with this check mark list icon for that one. For this view, we're going to go ahead and strip the grouping off entirely. So in group, we'll go to group by and we'll go to none, just like that. And then we're going to change our filter rules to be real simple here. We're just going to have the status is not done filter. We'll get rid of this project filter right here. And this is going to show us literally all of our unfinished tasks. And then finally, to finish this big view off, or this big set of views, let's go ahead and duplicate all once. And we're going to call this view done, or maybe complete. Let's go ahead and do this little big checkmark circle for done. We're going to go ahead and set our filter criteria to status is done and nothing else. And then I think do in descending order is totally going to make sense there. So as we check tasks off, we'll say we got the video filmed, we read this book, awesome possum, we lifted weights. Over here in complete, we can see all of those done tasks. And with that, you are now done with the tasks part of this build. If you don't care about projects or any of the fancy stuff we're going to add a bit later, you're actually done. You can very easily add tasks to your inbox, give them due dates, give them projects, and manage your tasks to your heart's content. But our projects database could use some TLC. So let's do that part next. Back into our databases page we go. We're going to scroll on past our tasks view right here, and we're going to find our projects database, which, as you can see, has that reciprocal or related property that connected to our project relation property in our tasks database. And as you can see here, it doesn't have a limit. If we edit the property, we have no limit, and that's exactly the way we want it because, again, multiple tasks can be associated with a single project. Also, projects can have statuses. They can have progress bars. So let's go ahead and add a few more properties to our projects database to make it useful. Let's go ahead and open this bad boy as a full page, just like that. Create another property of the status type like that. And once again, I want to change the colors up because I've got some synesthesia, but I also want to add a few more options because, at least in my book, projects have more statuses than just to do, doing, and done. So let's go ahead and add a few other ones. So I'm going to go ahead and rename not started to planned. You plan to do this project. In my mind, that's a blue status option. But in the to-do category, you may also have projects that did get started at one point, but are now on hold for some reason. So let's go ahead and make an on hold status. I'm going to make that red. And then in our in progress area, we're going to have a doing category or type. That's going to be green for me, but we're also going to have a type called ongoing. See, some projects in your life can act as containers for pieces of your life that need to be maintained indefinitely. like home maintenance tasks. I need to change the HVAC filter every so often. I need to check the radon system every so often. That's a project that will never end until I leave this mortal coil. So I think it's like shuffle off the mortal coil, if I wanted to say it correctly. I'm going to make an ongoing status, and maintenance projects like that will get that ongoing status. For me, that is an orange option right there. And then done can be called done, but it needs to be purple for some reason in my head. So we have our status property all done. Let's go ahead and close that out. Let's scrunch it up, make sure that the longest possible option doesn't clip. I think that's looking real good. Now, let's go ahead and make some additional properties. So another property we may want to add is a checkbox property that we're going to call archived. And that is because you may want to archive projects that have the done status. So that way the done column in the board view we're going to create in a little bit doesn't get super crowded over time. So we're going to call this archived. I'm going to find like a little X trash bin, container X icon for it. And if we want to, we can check off a project as archived and send it to a special archived view that we're going to build later. Let's also create our customary created time and edited time properties. I'm going to shorten those to created and edited respectively. So there's created and there is edited. And finally, we're going to create a formula property in this database called progress. And this is going to get us a nice little progress bar to show us the percentage of tasks that are completed in the projects database. We're going to code that formula in just a bit, but first I want to go ahead and actually set up our project page layout, just like we did with our tasks database. So let's go ahead and open this bad boy up right here. Again, we have this really annoyingly long list of all of our properties that we don't want to see when we go into this page. In fact, what we really want to see is a list of our tasks that need to be done, but with their properties. So we're going to create those views in a bit. And to set ourselves up for that, let's go ahead and go back to customize layout and set our layout up as we want it. So in the heading box, I'm going to go ahead and pin a property or two. I think status makes sense to pin. I also think progress makes sense to pin. We're going to have a nice little bar there once we get the formula coded up. And then again, I'm going to move the property group over into the panel. I think I'm going to hide the created property, hide the edited property, and definitely hide that tasks property. We pretty much never need to see it in that configuration. Archived, we can leave open. That way, if we want to archive a project, we can just go right here, check it, and we can archive it just like that. And that is going to be our page layout for our projects database. To pair with that page layout, let's go ahead and create some actual views for our projects database. And to do that, we need to escape the database itself, head on up to the database's page, and then crawl one level up once again, like the Spelunky protagonist going up a ladder, to the Ultimate Tasks homepage here. So beneath these task views, let's go ahead and do a /1 for the heading 1. We'll make a projects section right here. And first and foremost, we're going to create a really handy view for our active projects. So let's do /list one more time. Let's find our projects current database, create a new list view of that. We're going to call this active. And I think a good icon for active is going to be the fast forward icon right there. Playback fast forward. I'm going to hide the database title. I'm going to show the page icon because we won't have checkboxes here. And I'm going to hit done. Now for the filters and the sorts in this view, I'm going to go with, once again, an advanced filter, which is my preference. We want to make sure that we're only seeing projects that are in our doing category or in progress category. So that's going to include our doing and ongoing statuses, and we can check the in progress group to get them both. We also want to make sure that if we've archived a project, we don't see it in any of these views. So we're going to add a secondary filter rule, make sure we have and here, and we're going to change this over to archived is unchecked, just like that. Now, because we want to see both ongoing and doing one-time projects, I'm going to create some grouping for those as well. So into the view options menu we go. We're going to find group just like that, and we're going to group by the status, but we're only going to show ongoing and doing. So I'm going to do a little trick here. I'm going to uncheck hide empty groups, and then I'm going to purposefully hide these specific groups that I don't want to see. Now, of course, our filters also ensure that we're only going to see projects in these categories, but this basically ensures we won't see these other categories ever. Doing and ongoing are in a perfect order. I'm totally happy with that. Let's go into our properties menu right here and maybe show our status and our progress formula property. And in fact, actually status is a little bit redundant here because we can see it like that. So I might actually hide it there and only show our progress formula, which we're going to create pretty shortly here. Now, in terms of sort, you could leave this with no sort rules, so you can drag projects around, or if you wanted to, you could do an edited sort in descending order, And that's going to make sure that the projects you have most recently updated are going to be at the top. Now, there is one little caveat there. That would have to be edits specifically to the project page itself. If you wanted, say, edits to specific tasks to change the sort order down here for projects, you would need something a little bit fancier. And I have actually built that into Ultimate Brain, my second brain template, which you are free to study or just grab a copy of Ultimate Brain if you want it in your life. But this is a pretty good, simplistic way to do stuff. Okay, so now we have our active view. That's going to show us all the stuff we're actually doing in our lives right now. Let's pair that with a few other views where we can see projects that we've planned and projects that are done, on hold, all that good stuff. So we're going to go ahead and duplicate this active view because we want another list view. We're going to call this one planned, and we're going to give the planned view a nice little clipboard icon. So we'll find clipboard right there. We will go ahead and get rid of our grouping because we're only showing the planned status. So no need for grouping there. And we're going to go ahead and change the filters to where status is planned specifically and nothing else. Now we do want to keep on hold projects out of here because I think planned and on hold are very different types of statuses. So we're just going to go with planned. And then I think edited in descending order actually makes sense here as well. The next view we're going to build is going to be a board view or a Kanban view of all of our statuses. So once again, we can duplicate here. It's just my preferred way of doing things. We're going to call this board, and we're going to change our layout from list to board just like that. We're going to go ahead and keep our database title hidden. We are going to set our card size to small so we can see more on a smaller screen. We'll wrap our properties. We'll group by status. I do want to color my columns, and I think that's all good for these settings here. Now, the first thing I'd like to do to this view is go to our grouping rules and actually not hide empty groups because I want us to be able to drag projects from one status to another. We also need to edit our filters because before we had duplicated this, so now we have a status is planned filter. Let's go ahead and get rid of that and make sure that we can see projects throughout all statuses in this board view. I think we also want to go ahead and change this from the clipboard icon to just nothing. So we get that little board icon like that. So now we can very easily just drag projects from one of these Kanban categories to another just like that. And I think Setup Video Studio is actually a doing project, not an ongoing project. Build out Garage Gym maybe is something I'm not doing yet, so I'm going to keep that in planned. And just like that, if we go back to our active category here, we can see the projects that we are actively doing, as well as ongoing projects that represent maintenance tasks in our life. So to finish out our projects view here, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate the planned view one more time, and we're going to make a view for any projects that we've archived. These are projects that are done, and we just don't want to see them anymore in any of the other views. We'll go with container X for that icon there. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and just change our filter rule to where archived is checked. We'll get rid of the status rule altogether, and then edited in descending order, I think actually makes sense perfectly for this view as well. And while I'm thinking about it, because we are only showing a single status on these two views, why don't we go into the view options and also show that actual status just like that, and do the same thing over here. So we can change that status very easily if we want to. So that's all of our views done, but the next thing we want to do is actually be able to go into a project page and see all the tasks that are due within that project right here. And yes, we can go over here and see all the tasks in this relation property, but that's just not very useful. Instead, what we want to create is something a bit more like this in my demo copy here, where when we click into a page, we actually see all of the tasks that are due, and we can see their status as well within the project. So to do that, we are going to go one level up in our Notion advanced complexity hierarchy here, and we're going to create a database template. So far, what I've showed you is the ability to create blank pages in databases. And one thing that I will note is when you create a page in a view that has filters, like this one right here, the filters are going to force that page to have certain property values. Like if I create a page in the doing category and we name it like nothing, you're going to notice that its status is doing because it has to be doing. We are forcing it to have that value by creating it in this particular area. But we can go a bit further, and we can actually make it so that when you create a new page, it has default content on the page body. That's called a database template. So this is very useful for projects. And to build one, we can go to the little blue arrow icon right here next to new, and we can create ourselves a new template. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to create a template right there. I'm going to go ahead and make this a full width page. And because this is, again, basically a piece of software we're building, not like just a page of notes, I'm going to make this a full width page. And I'm also going to turn off our table of contents. So getting out of that menu, the next thing I want to do is give this a nice little default title. So I'll just call this project. It's going to be applied on every new page you create, and then you can change it. We'll give it a nice little icon. And again, I think a blue rocket ship icon is going to be perfect for this purpose. But the most important thing we're going to be doing here is creating another view of our tasks database. So let's create a list view just like that. Let's find our tasks current database. We'll do a new list view just like that. And I'm going to go a little bit faster because you've already seen me doing this. So I'm going to go with list, hide the database title, hide the page icon, hit done. We'll go into our properties, we'll grab status, we'll grab not project because we know we're in the project already. We will grab meta labels and do. We're gonna go ahead and grab status, put it right there, change it over to a checkbox value just like that. And what do you know? We have a tasks view that looks pretty much like it did for the inbox. But importantly, we only wanna see tasks that are within this project in this particular view. So let's use filters for that purpose. So if we go into our filters, we're gonna create one of the most important types of filters to know about in Notion. This is maybe my favorite feature in Notion, actually. If we set our project relation property to the template right here, this project template, we create what's called a self-referential filter. This is essentially a filter that will update itself when we apply this template to a new page. So say we applied this project template to our setup video studio project. If we looked in the filters, you're going to see that it auto updates to the setup video studio project instead of pointing back to this template. And that's what's going to allow us to always apply the project template and have the filters set up magically without having to do any work ourselves. So project contains project. That's pretty much all we need here. And I think for the purposes of actually looking at all the tasks in a project, we may want to see the done tasks in the same view as the tasks that are still to be done. So let's go ahead and sort this by due in ascending order, just like always. We're going to go over to our grouping and we're going to group this by status. Personally, I only use to do and done in list views. So I'm going to not hide my empty groups, but I am going to hide the doing group just like that. And then I'm going to duplicate this view and I'm going to create a board view as well. So we'll duplicate this, call this one board. I'm going to change the layout to board, just like we did before. Change the card size to small. Keep all the properties wrapped. We're going to group by status as always, color those columns. And if we go in here, we can actually shortcut over to the grouping settings so we can make sure we're not hiding our empty groups. And that's going to give us our board view. We can check our filter and settings again. Do in ascending order makes sense. This is perfect as our one filter for the board view. And to finish this off in the project template, we're going to go ahead and also duplicate this one more time and create a calendar view. So this will give us a nice little calendar specifically for the project. We'll wrap the page titles. We are going to show pages inside peak because that's my preference. Of course, you can do whatever you want. And the properties we're going to show should include, I think, the status, and that might be it. And it does occur to me that I think I forgot to change the property display in the board view. So let's go into our three-dot menu one more time, go to properties, and I think we can show the due date here. And that probably is all we need to show right there. So now we have this essentially reusable project template. And whenever we apply it to a project page, we're going to be able to very easily see all the tasks inside of that project. And we can actually demonstrate that right now. So let's go back to our projects database. And in fact, we can just crawl up the tree a few more steps and go right back to the projects section we created. So if I open up Setup Video Studio, you'll see that I have not already applied a template, and I also don't have any content on the page. So I can very easily click project. And just like that, you see all of the tasks that are within that project. And like I said before, the self-referential filter updates auto-magically to reference the page where this view is. So we can do the same thing for home ongoing. And I do want to show you a trick. Let's say that instead of this view here, you already had just a bunch of content on the page like that. Well, if you already have content on the page, you can't apply a template. So you can either delete all that content, or if you want to keep that content, I'd recommend go ahead and copying it to your clipboard so you can very easily paste it later on. So now that I've gotten the page empty again, I can apply the project just like that, and I could paste the content that I already had on the page down here so I don't lose it. And the last thing I want to do with this project template is ideally make sure it's always applied when I create a new project page. I always want to see this stuff. So we can accomplish that by closing this little side peek view here and then going once again to our blue drop-down menu, going to the 3-dot menu for our project template and setting it as the default. And if we choose for all views in this project's current database, it's going to become the default project template or database template that is applied anytime we create a new page, no matter where we are in this database. So if I go over to this board view right here and I create another planned project, and this one is take over the world, same thing we do every day, Pinky, we're going to see our template automatically applied. So at this point, we have our project template set up. We've got our project views set up. We have our tasks view set up as well, but we haven't given much love to that task journal database. So I want to help you create a view for that as well. Before we do, I'm going to show you how it looks in the Ultimate Tasks template. This is that free task manager template that I showed you, or that I mentioned in the beginning of this video. So there, we have this little nav bar, and this shows a whole bunch of internal pages, which at this point in the video, you should know how to create. You should also know how to create specialized views of a database. So if you want to create an internal page like this with specialized views of your journal, you can totally do that. To save on time in this video though, we're going to keep things very simple, and we're just going to add a journal tab directly to this set of tasks views here. And this will also serve to show you something that I don't know that I've showed in any video content before, which is the fact that when you create what's called a linked database block right here, the tabs in it can actually link to different databases. So far, all of these views we've created, all these tabs, link to the tasks database. But if we create a new one, we can actually create a list view and it'll ask us which database we want to link to. So in this case, instead of tasks current, we're going to find our task journal. And there it is. And now we have a brand new list view of our task journal database, which is inside of this linked database view, which mostly has task database views. So we'll go ahead and call this a journal. We're going to go ahead and give this a nice little open book icon. So let's find that icon right there, book open. We will hide the database title, show page icons. I think it's going to be perfectly good like that. And if you wanted to use this on a daily basis, maybe you put this journal view right over here next to your inbox. Or if it's less frequently used, you come down here and you put it at the bottom. Totally up to you. But you can create brand new pages in here. And to make things a little bit easier, we can leverage database templates just like we did with our projects database. I want to show you a couple of cool tricks that I haven't already shown you with those database templates. First, let's create a blank page in our task journal because I want to go ahead and give it another property. So we'll just call this one today. We'll open this as a page and add a property. We're going to find a date property, and we're just going to call that date. Totally good. So let's now go ahead and delete this page because we don't need it. We're going to create one from the template in just a second. We'll once again go to our blue arrow right here, create a new template inside of our task journal. And if you type the @ symbol and type today, you get the option to reference the date when duplicated or the specific day when you create this little date reference. So we're going to go with date when duplicated. We'll call this today tasks. And then in the date property, we also get dynamic values, including now and today. And you can see it's date or time when duplicated. So we're going to set today as our dynamic value here. And essentially now with this database template in place, we're going to get a bit of a smarter journal entry when we create one. Let's once again set this as a default for all views because we pretty much always want to apply this template. Now, you don't always want to go with default across all views for every kind of database you're designing. Some databases might have multiple templates, but in this case, it really does make sense. And now that we have that in place, we can create a brand new page. And just like that, we have today tasks as our title. If we go into the page, we can see that this is the date that gets automatically applied. And on this page, you can basically brain dump all the tasks you want to do, or, and this is a really cool thing, I'm going to zoom out a couple of ticks for, you can make this essentially a split view where you're looking through all of your task database views, you're looking through your inbox, you're looking through your tasks that are due today, and maybe you're creating a specific little just checkbox list of the things you're actively going to work on. Again, not everybody vibes with this style of task management. Some people are just going to want to look at their actual views here and check things off. But a lot of people I know really benefit from essentially having what amounts to a digital whiteboard where they write out what they are planning on getting done, because sometimes due dates just get out of sync with reality. Sometimes the system gets messy, and when the system is messy, just writing stuff out and getting stuff done sometimes is the order of the day. So you can use this as a blank whiteboard. You also know now how to create database templates. So if you wanted to create like a call out in here or journaling prompts or really anything you want, you can do that because you now know how to create those database templates. So with that, we are now going to move on to one of our more advanced topics in this little mini course, and that is implementing recurring tasks, because wouldn't you believe it, Notion actually can do these now. And if you want, you can even automate them. So to enable us to do recurring tasks in Notion, we are going to have to create a few new properties inside of our tasks database. So to do that, let's go on to our databases page one more time. Let's go ahead and find a task here that actually makes sense as a recurring task. I think change HVAC filter is actually perfect for this. And we're going to go ahead and open this up as a full page. I'm also going to open up the property panel and show all of our properties. And I think I actually want to create a special section for these as well. So let's go ahead and customize the layout one more time. We're going to click our property group. We're going to add a section, and we're going to call this section recurring tasks properties. And we can create the properties in here, but now that we have the section, we can also apply this all pages, and we can open up the property group one more time and create them outside of the layout builder, which is my preference. And to enable recurring tasks, we need a few different properties. The first one is going to be a number type property, and this is going to be called recur interval. We're also going to create a select type property. We're going to call that recur unit. And in recur unit, we are going to have a few different options: days, weeks, months, and years. Now, for the purposes of this video, we are keeping things simple, and these options do need to be all lowercase. If you want to get fancier, you can see my recurring tasks in Notion video that I published very recently. That video will show you how to get fancy with your recur unit options, and you can even do some really fancy stuff inside of Ultimate Tasks and Ultimate Brain, like nth week of the month, every third Thursday of the month, basically, some crazy stuff like that. Here, again, we're keeping things real simple. So we got recur interval, recur unit. That is going to lead us to a formula type property, and it's going to be called next due. So if we have a due date like March 10th, 2025, if we have a recur interval like say 3, and we have a recur unit like say months, so this is a task we want to do every 3 months, we can build ourselves our first Notion formula. I'm going to zoom in real far so you can see exactly what I'm typing here. This might be a little bit of a leap if you're new to Notion, but stick with me and this is going to make sense. Essentially, we can write formulas that are kind of like Excel formulas or Google Sheets formulas, which will output a value based on the code we write in here and other properties that we want to reference. So what we want to do is apply the recur interval and the recur unit to the current due date. Essentially, we want to take a number of months, in this case, and add it to whatever's currently in our due property. So to do that, we can reference our due property just like this. Then we can do dot and we can do date add. And this is a function that is going to add a number of units, and those units are going to be defined here to the current date. So we can go with our recur interval option as the number. We can go with our recur unit option or property as the unit there. And I actually want to show you the reference for this property here because every function has one. It says here adds time to the date. The unit argument can be one of years, quarters, months, etc. And here you can actually see the syntax. So this is going to be your first argument. You could either use the current date, which is now, or a date property just like this. And then you can put the other arguments inside of the parentheses. This is your unit right here, which is a variable for us. And this is that's your recur interval. And this is the actual unit, which again is a variable that we set over here. So this is the power of Notion formulas. We can reference properties which can have different values per task or per page. So if we save this, now we can see this task is due June 10th, 2025. Now let's say we are really up and up on our HVAC and we want to make sure we're changing the filter every single day, which you'd never want to do, but for the sake of example, we're going to do that. If we set the recur interval to 1 and we set the unit to days, now it's a daily task. And if we want to automate this, we actually can do that. Now I'm going to go through this really quickly because I'm trying to make this video as accessible as possible to everyone. And that includes people who are not on Notion's paid plan. But I do want to mention this because it is very useful. If you happen to be on Notion's paid plan, you've got this little lightning icon right here for creating automations. And what we can do is actually automatically move the due date of a task, a recurring task specifically, to its next due date when we check it off. And I want to show you quickly how to build that automation. I also want to note that if you are in a free plan, you can get Ultimate Tasks again for free in the description, and it comes with the automation, which will work out of the box. If you get a template with automations, they work. You just have to pay for Notion if you want to build your own automations or edit them. So to build this automation, we are very quickly going to duplicate our complete view right here just to get ourselves a list view. I'm going to call this view recurring. Let's go ahead and give it a repeat icon like that. And it's very important that we create a view specifically for recurring tasks to build this automation. So I'm going to go ahead and change my filter criteria to where do is not empty, and also to where our recur interval is greater than or equal to 1. So this is building a view that we know will only contain recurring tasks inside of it. And once we have a view with those rules in place, we can create an automation that will only trigger for tasks in that specific view. And that's pretty important because we don't want this logic triggering for one-time tasks. We only want it to trigger for recurring tasks that have the recurrence rules that we set up. So we're going to change this over to the recurring view. We'll go ahead and name this process recurring tasks. And then our trigger is going to be whenever our status property is set to the complete option, which is we've named done. And the action, which will happen automatically whenever this happens, is that we're going to set our edit property to status, and we're going to set that back to do. But we're also going to edit another property. We're going to edit our do property. And this is one of my favorite new Notion features that came out last year. We can set the do property to a custom formula. And look at this. This is just like what we had earlier with that next do formula editor. We get the full formula editor here, and we can do trigger page dot, and then we can access a property of the page that triggered this automation, which in our case will be next do. That's all we have to do. So if we save this and we create it, now if we go ahead and check off this task, in just a second, Notion Automations is going to trigger. We're going to get the status set back to do, and our due date is going to be set to whatever it is, March 11th, because we set that as a daily task. As a reminder, you can get that automation for free in Ultimate Tasks if you're not on a paid plan. Otherwise, you can see how simple it is to build. So let's go back up to our Ultimate Tasks homepage, because now that we have recurring tasks, it might be useful to have a specific view in our task manager that shows us all of those recurring tasks. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and just right-click my today view and duplicate that since it's going to be a list view. I'm going to call it recurring, just like that. We're going to change the icon to that nice little arrows repeat icon. And I want to also see my done tasks in this view. So I'm going to go ahead and group this by status. I'm going to unhide my empty groups, but hide doing just like that. And I'm going to change my filters to what we already created, where do is not empty and where recur interval is greater than or equal to 1. That's going to ensure that I always see my recurring tasks. What it's also going to do is allow you to manually process your recurring tasks if you want to. If you don't have access to those automations, when you check off a task, you could just change the due date to what's displayed in next due. And that's a pretty simple way to do those if you're not automating things. Okay, so we have built in our first advanced feature, which is recurring tasks. We are now going to move on to our second advanced feature, which are subtasks. It's actually a built-in Notion feature now, and I want to show you how to implement them in your database. Now, this is kind of complex. Subtasks do have some pitfalls, so we might have a little bit of extra work to do here to make them work really well, but if you do really like subtasks, we can get them working pretty well. So in our tasks database, underneath our databases page, we can go into our three-dot menu just like that. And if we go back to customize tasks right here, you'll see that there's also this subtasks option. So if we add that and turn on subtasks, we are going to get two new properties in our database. We're going to get two relation properties that are actually connected to each other. And you can also see that we have this little toggle arrow, and we kind of actually have to drag out our status property right now because the toggle arrow is sort of blocking it, but we can actually fix that, and I'll show you how. First, notice that when we have this arrow toggled open, we can create sub items underneath our tasks here. And I actually don't want to add one to a recurring task. I'm just going to go over to the active area here and instead find mark floor spots for tripods. We'll add a sub item called buy gaff tape. I think that makes sense. And just like that, we've created a subtask as part of this task right here. Now I can see my checkbox here. I can see these arrows here. I don't like that. So I'm going to go over to my view options. I'm going to go back to customize tasks, go to subtasks, and I'm going to go to my advanced settings right here. And here you can see show nesting toggle on title. I actually like that quite a lot for table views. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to actually have to come back to this subtasks setting quite a few times because this nested in toggle view, while useful, does have some pitfalls, especially with the projects and tasks setup that we've created here. So before we get into all of that, I do want to open up one of these tasks and show you the new properties that were created. And I also want to customize how they look. So down here inside of helper properties, you can see that we now have a parent task relation property and a subtask relation property, and they are actually connected together. So this is an example of a relation property that exists in the same database, and it models a parent and sub or parent-child relationship right here. So I actually want to show these over here to make it more obvious when a task has subtasks or when a task is a subtask. So to do that, we're going to go back to customize layout just like that. We're going to go to our property group, head over to helper properties, and we're going to do something that at least today is a little fancy. Hopefully it's going to be easier in the future, but I'm going to click this parent task relation property. We're going to add it to the layout, and I'm going to do the same thing back into property group for the subtask property, just like that. And by adding it to the layout, let me go and zoom out a couple of ticks here. By adding it to the layout, I can now click the 3-dot menu on the parent task, and I can go to advanced and convert to relations group. And if I do that, I can then do it for the subtask relation as well, advanced, convert to relations group or add to relations group. And that will create a single box here for any relations that I care to add. I could also add the project relation to the relations group. I think personally, I'm just gonna go ahead and keep it like this, where I'm showing subtask and parent task. Now, if you wanted to, you could go over here to the relations group, make sure it's selected, and you could change the visibility for each of these properties. You could make them minimal and always make sure you have to click on them before you see any content. But I think in this instance, it's actually quite useful to be able to open up a page and see the subtasks right there. Something else that is quite useful to do is that when you have a relation property here on a page, there's this little 3-dot icon here called Customize Shown Properties. And if you click that, you can actually show specific properties from these linked pages. And I think it would be quite useful to show the status and maybe even the due date for your subtasks here. We can also do that for projects. Now, it's not very useful to do up in here because it's a pinned property, but if you click the project on a task, you got the same option here in the relation picker. And we might want to show both the status and the progress, which we're going to show as a progress bar in a little bit right here on all these projects. Okay, at this point, we have subtasks on, but I do want to note that there is a potential pitfall you can run into with those subtasks. And it has to do with the task views that we put into our projects template. So let me explain. This can get a little bit complicated, but I think it's pretty important to understand if you are going to use subtasks. If I create a subtask underneath this task right here, you can see that it does not automatically inherit the project relation of its parent. Now, again, if you have a paid Notion plan and you have access to this automations feature, you could create an automation that syncs the parent project to the subtask. In fact, we ship that automation in Ultimate Brain. It's disabled by default, but it is in there and you can very easily enable it even if you're on a free plan. But by default, Notion won't do it. And you can run into a little bit of a pitfall in that situation because look here, we can see buy gaff tape directly under mark floor spots for tripods. But if we go into the setup video studio project, we've got these sub items on, but look, mark floor spots for tripods, it's not there. And that's because the filters we created are only going to show tasks where the project relation directly contains setup video studio. So this is one issue that I do have with subtasks in Notion. People often build setups like this. I think this setup is incredibly useful, but then they'll go and create subtasks in another view where we don't have these filters and then go into a view like this and go, where are my subtasks? I don't see them. So for that reason, and I'm only going to show this in one instance just to keep this video from being super long. For that reason, I prefer a different way of viewing subtasks in most instances. So in an inbox, for example, instead of showing subtasks in this nested toggle view, I think you should only show parents. I think you should create subtasks directly on the page like this. And if you agree with me, what you can do is go over to your view options right here. You can go to customize tasks for this view. You can go into subtasks, and instead of showing this as nested in toggle, you can show parents only. And if you have subtasks in an inbox task, let's say that write video script has a subtask right here. We'll add one called do the research. You're going to see this little icon indicating that this task does have subtasks. I think that's quite useful. And this is pretty important to also implement in the project template. So if you're going to use subtasks, I recommend going back into your project template here, editing it, and then in these views that we created earlier, Just going into that customize area one more time, going to subtasks and setting that to parent only. Now for date-based views, so here, this is not a date-based view. I think this is a project-based view. But for date-based views, like the today view, if you are going to not show that toggle view, instead of parents only, it's actually important that you go to a different option. So if we go to subtasks here, for a date-based view, it's pretty important to use flattened list instead. And the logic there is that if you give a due date to a subtask, you should see that subtask listed in the order of its due date. You shouldn't have to drill into a parent task that may have a much later due date, because otherwise you may miss the due date for that subtask. So the rule is, if it's a date-based view, use flattened list. Otherwise, use either the nested and toggle list if you like it, or to be safe, use the parent only view. Now, a few times throughout this course, I've alluded to a progress bar that we want to show on our projects, and we currently don't have that. So let's go ahead and fix that now. Let's go to a random project, because at this point we need to do a little bit of formula coding to get this to be something other than empty. We want to actually show a progress bar. So I'm going to go ahead and open up this Setup Video Studio project, and I'm going to add one more task to this project. Let's go ahead and call this mount the backdrop. And I want to check this task off just like that. And I want to have 6 tasks for a reason that will become evident in just a second. So to show ourselves a progress bar, we need this formula property to output a numeric value. I'm not going to get too much into formulas in this video. I've got a whole formulas video planned, as well as a formula reference website with literally every function documented. But the gist is, Notion formulas can output data with different data types. You can output strings, which are text value. You can output numeric values that you can do actual math on. You can output arrays or lists. You can output dates, all kinds of stuff. And for a progress bar, we need to output a numeric value. So if we did something like, say, 5 divided by 6, we're going to get a numeric value there. And once we have a numeric value in our formula property, we can actually edit that property, and we're going to see the same number options that we would have in a number type property, including our number format, which we would want to switch over to %, and the little progress bars here. So let's go to bar. You could also do ring. And here we can see we have 83.333% repeating, along with a nice little progress bar. So we have 2 tasks at this point: get rid of these trailing decimals and just get 83%, but also get some accurate numbers in here, because right now we just have 5 by 6. So if we're thinking about a progress bar, we need to take the number of done tasks in the project divided by the number of tasks in the project. And here is how to get that number. First, we're going to take our tasks relation property. And as you can see, this actually outputs a list of all those tasks. We're going to pass that into the filter function. And the filter function allows us to define criteria, and only the pages in that initial list that meet the criteria will come out of the filter function and be its return value. So we can use this little keyword called current, which basically references the current item in the list that's being fed through this machine that is filter. And we are going to say where the current pages status equals, which is the equality operator, done. The string done. So we can see we only have 1 in here. So if we pass this, the return value there, which is just a single, a list with a single element in it, if we pass that into this length function here, we're going to get the number 1, which, because we've already formatted this formula as a %, we'll say 100%. So that is our first element. But we want to divide that by, you can probably guess this, but the number of tasks in the project without any filtering there. So we're going to do tasks.length for that. And just like that, we get 16.666 repeating in this little return value here. So we fixed one of our issues. We have accurate data, but we still have this decimal repeating problem. So what we can do to fix this is pass this whole thing into a function called round. So I'm going to put a parenthesis in front of that right there. I'm going to put another parenthesis at the end. And if we do dot round, we can get a rounded value. But the problem is, because we're using decimal values, we're rounding to the nearest integer, which in this case is 0. We don't want to do that. So here's another trick. If you multiply everything that you're doing in here by 100, you're going to get a bigger percentage. And then if you divide your rounded number by the same number, 100, you're going to get the actual percentage right there. Now, if you did by 1,000 and 1,000, you would get the next decimal position. If you did by 10,000 and 10,000, you would get 2 decimal positions. And that's a cool trick for rounding to a specific decimal point, which can be very useful also when working with percentages. So I'm going to go with just 100, 100. That gets us a nice round integer percentage. And with that, we have our progress bar. Awesome. Now we can see our progress across all of our projects. Let's go and zoom out just a little bit so you can see that a bit more. Hopefully I'm not too zoomed out. And if we go back, we're now going to see our progress bars on all of these projects. And it looks like I've done none of my tasks for home ongoing, but if I check my radon system levels, we can actually see 50%. Now for an ongoing task, we're usually going to have, or a project, we're usually going to have recurring tasks only in here, which if we're automating them are often going to get set back to do. So a progress bar really only makes sense for doing projects, not for ongoing, but still it's pretty nice. Okay, so we've built one of our two kind of complex formulas in this video. And actually, I think we actually had three because of next do, but we have one more, and that is the meta labels property that we set up all the way back when we were setting up our initial tasks database. And the meta labels property, to show you a little example here, is going to show us these little icons when they are relevant. So this little yellow icon is going to basically alert us that this lift weights task is overdue. And then this little icon is going to show us that this read book task is actually a recurring task. So if you want that, we can build a formula to get you that. And because we thought ahead and we already showed meta labels on all of our list views, all we need to do is write the formula and we're going to get the benefits of it across all these views without having to edit them again. So let's open any task. Let's open this as a full page, open up our view details area right there. And we tucked that meta labels property in the helper properties right there. So let's access our formula editor and start thinking through the problem. So we want to build a property that can output one or potentially multiple icons depending on certain statuses of the task, whether it's overdue, whether it's recurring, and if you wanted to, you could add additional status types in the future. So what we're going to do is use a really handy function called lets. And lets us define variables and then give those variables values. And then we can reference the variable names later on instead of having to copy and paste the same value multiple times or the same code. So we're going to create a variable for recurring label. I'm going to call it recurring label and use camel case just because I can. And I'm going to give it a comma there. That's the name of the label or the variable. And then the value of this variable is going to be an if statement. So we can use if right there. We can enter down, and the condition here is going to be if this task's next do property is not empty. So we'll do not empty and put next do inside of the empty function here. Then if it's not empty, we are going to output a nice little emoji, which will be our repeat emoji. So we'll put that in quotes, which is defining this as a string or a piece of text. And then the else case. So if next do is empty, we are going to output nothing. So we won't put a comma at the end of our last argument inside of the if function, but we do need a comma right there after the if function itself. So that'll be our recurring labels value. And you can see if our final argument in lets is simply recurring label, it's going to show us either empty or it's going to show us that little icon if this were to be a recurring task. And in fact, read book and take notes is probably a recurring task. So let's go ahead and give that a recur interval of 1, a recur unit of days, and there's our next do value, and there's our meta label. Check that out. But we want to get a little fancier, of course. We want to also be able to see if tasks are overdue. So instead of showing recurring label only, we are going to define a secondary variable, which is going to be overdue label. And once again, we're going to use an if formula right here. Pause the video and think through this problem if you want to get a little bit of practice here, or maybe even try to do this ahead of me. But assuming you've unpaused it and you haven't solved it yet, we're going to do if today, which is a nice little function, which is going to output the current date, is greater than or later than the do property. We are going to output a string value, which will be, I believe it's just called warning. There we go, which is weird in the formula editor, but does look correct in the rest of Notion. Otherwise, we'll show nothing. So we've created our two labels. Now what we can do is define a list with these little two brackets, just like that. And we're going to go with overdue label. We're going to go with recurring label as elements in the list. And then we're going to pass that list into a function called join. And we can join whatever is in there with a space character. And that's it. So if this task were both recurring and overdue, we would get both of those labels. If it were not an overdue task or a recurring task at all, just overdue, we're going to get that label right there. And if we go back out to our Ultimate Tasks homepage and see our tasks views, now we can see these handy little icons on our meta labels property for each of these tasks. So with that done, I now want to teach you a little bit of button automation to make your task manager a bit more usable, especially on the Notion mobile app. So beneath our Ultimate Tasks title here and above our views right here, I'm going to enter down and I'm going to type /but because I can. And I'm going to do a button block here. And the button block is essentially a little way to trigger automations by clicking a button in Notion. And even if you're on the free plan, you can use this. So it's really, really powerful. And in this case, we're just going to create a very simple button that creates a new task. So we're going to call this new task. We're going to give it a nice little check box or check mark icon. And when the button is clicked, we're going to do two things. First, we're going to add a page 2. We're going to select our tasks current database right there. And if we had any sort of page templates inside of our tasks database, we can actually apply those if we wanted to. Ultimate Brain comes with quite a few, like a task history template. There is a time tracking template. There's all kinds of stuff. I'm going to teach these in future videos too. But because we don't have any, we don't have that option. But we can create a brand new task in that database, and then we can add a second action where we open that specific page. So let's do that open action. Let's open the page that we added in the button. We'll change it over to side peek. And now we have this nice little button where if we're on mobile, we could just do new task, easily just brain dump a task into the inbox. We'll call this, I don't know, pet a hippo. And if you're on your phone, that's a super duper quick way to add a task without having to click a tiny little button on these specific views here. And if we wanted to, we could do the same thing for projects. So just enter down from projects quickly now, /but new project, just like that. Let's give it that rocket ship icon because we love that for projects. Do an action, add a page 2. We're going to use our project's current database this time. Here, you can see we're automatically applying the default project template, which is kind of what I alluded to before. We're going to open that page in side peek. So page added from the button, switch from center peek to side peek. And now you have a super quick way of creating a brand new project. So we still have a few spit and polish items to do here. And to do those, we're going to scoot on over to our databases page one more time. First, we have this little current suffix on all of our databases, and maybe you didn't create those, but I did. So I want to go ahead and delete those really quickly. And then we are going to turn these into full pages and we are going to lock them up. And I'll tell you why in just a second. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those current suffixes. If we want to, we can click the 6 dot icon right here and turn this into a page, which just makes things a bit more organized in our databases page. And then I highly recommend, once you are done with your customizations, to go into each of these databases, go to the 3 dot menu up here and lock the database. This is especially important if you're using this template you've built with a team, because if the database isn't locked, it's very easy to accidentally click a property and delete it, or change its settings, or do something else you might not want to do. And that's especially likely to happen if you have a bunch of people using the same tool, and if those people maybe don't know Notion as well as you now do. So keep your databases locked when you're using them day to day, unlock them when you want to make customizations, and you're basically using this tool like you would with actual software, where sometimes you're the developer and sometimes you're the user. And with those databases locked, you are now done. You've got a fully functional task manager, you have project support, you got that journal view, you have quite a lot built into the system. So I want to show you what else you could add, give you a little bit of inspiration here. And I'm going to do that by showing you a few of the features in my Ultimate Brain template. This is what I use to manage my daily life. You can also get it over at thomasjfrank.com/brain, or you can take inspiration from this little segment right here to add some additional features to your own task manager, which I would encourage if you like building stuff yourself. So first and foremost, in addition to recurring tasks, you can do task history. For example, in this lift weights task here, you can see every time that I've done the task on this little demo copy here. This is the result of an automation that creates a historical record every time you check off the task, and it kind of turns Notion into a habit tracker as well as a task manager. It's quite useful. Something else you can do is, if we go down to our projects section here, you can actually sort your projects by latest activity across the tasks, or maybe even notes inside of the project. This is something that requires a bit more of a complex formula to build, but Ultimate Brain actually has open documentation, link in the description down below. So if you want to check out the formula we built to do this type of sorting, you can actually do that. It's completely free to read our docs. The only thing we sell is the actual templates itself. Something you can also do, which is really, really useful, is go into a project template like the one we built earlier. And in addition to your tasks views, also show views of a notes database. That way, this projects page becomes a full home base for everything involved in the project, both the tasks as well as any notes and reference materials you have for that project. And lastly, I wanted to show you my personal favorite part of Ultimate Brain. This is where I start every single day. This is the My Day dashboard. So in this tutorial, we built that really simple task journal database. This is kind of the next level up, where if we want to do a task, we can check this My Day checkbox right here, and it's going to add it down to this execute section. I find this to be very, very useful because when you just rely on due dates, sometimes you're not really fully prioritizing and taking seriously the tasks you need to get done in a day. So if you give yourself some kind of way to say, yes, I'm going to do these tasks today, maybe even order them, maybe even label them with the location or the level of energy they require, you're just so much more likely to get things done and to manage your time more effectively. Finally, speaking of time, something else you can do inside of Notion is actually implement time tracking, active time tracking, where when we check start on a task like this, it actually starts being actively tracked. And if we open up, let me zoom out just a couple of ticks here. If we open up our properties, we can actually see that there are time tracking properties we can create, and we have active sessions that are being tracked. You can actually do multiple sessions across a single task in your task manager. And I've got a whole video in the works on how to build this. It's already live in Ultimate Brain. So if you do want it and you want it done for you, you can go over to thomasjfrank.com/brain and get a copy of Ultimate Brain. That is a paid template. It helps to support my work here. And of course, if you want just the basics, a little bit beyond what we built in this tutorial, but a bit more of a basic task manager, you can get Ultimate Tasks, which is totally free. Both are linked in the description down below. Thanks as always for watching. Right here, you're going to find one more video on how to upgrade your task manager even further, or if you want to build a full second brain in Notion from scratch and do the job yourself, this video right here will show you exactly how to do it.